Paul. This is like a Corona survivors group, isn't it, with Jessica and you and I and others on it. So it's a great support group. Hi everyone, I think you can hear me, and I'll share my screen in a moment. What I'm going to show you just very briefly, it follows a point we had on one of these webinars a couple of weeks ago where everyone was talking about lots of geographical data and that being a problem, and Paul having a really good network of people who can sort out gazetteers and how postal geographies don't match with council boundaries and all sorts of things. And I kind of just made a comment that that's really, really important. But the other thing that's really important for us as an acute hospital is the geography within inside a building. So, you know, as Jessica will probably have realised, that hospitals are quite dangerous places to be, unfortunately. So you might go there with COVID, but you might catch COVID when you get there as well. You know, with best intentions from everyone. So we've been doing some work looking geographically inside a building, which I'm just going to try and share my screen. So you should have my Google browser. Have a yes or a thumbs up. Yeah, okay, thanks Patrick. So I'll just show you a couple of things we're looking at, and I'll quickly refresh a couple of things that we did. So we internally we've sort of moved some services around. Do you get my PowerPoint as well? Have you got my PowerPoint? Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, bear with me. So one of the issues that we've had is we had to kind of quickly move some services around, and we did kind of very traditional kind of graphing, just showing kind of where we had nosocomial infection. So KNC is a hospital at Canterbury, the Kent and Canterbury, and we tracked our nosocomial infections, and we did this kind of traditional, well, this is where we found some cases, we then found some more here, and so on, and kind of stuff that people would be used to. And we looked at when we moved some services very quickly and tactically between sites, and we did a kind of traditional, you know, what do people think? And it was very kind of labour intensive and talking to lots of people. And then what we thought we would do is kind of get to here, which we'd actually started designing for other things. So you've got my Google browser again?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Corona Y. Good nodding. And there's two kind of aspects to it here. So one at a very simple level, we're a big hospital, 6th biggest hospital in the country, and lots of people turn up with letters. You know, who sends letters anymore? But they turn up with letters because they've got an outpatient appointment or a diagnostic test or something like that. And these are big kind of unwieldy buildings. And as some people said to me a while ago, hospitals, and this screen kind of exemplifies it, hospitals look like someone's gone up in a helicopter with Lego and thrown it out the window. And why would you know your way around a hospital? So what we thought we would do is to drop a web link into a letter or a text or via an app that we provide for patients so they can actually see where they're going. So at its very simplest level, we just worked with a local university and got a student to map geographically all the vectors so that we can draw different parts of the hospital. So at least they know from where to park their car, kind of how to get to the hospital. So they would get this type of thing in their letter and actually know where to park their car and the big building to head for. What we then did, we start to develop that and say, well, you might turn up in a certain place. I hope this is sort of all rendering okay. So you might turn up at the A&E department, and you might need to get to the stroke ward, which is Richard Stevens. So we'll pick that here for them, and we just show them simply, and we can track them as they're going. If I was on site, I could have this on my phone, and it would be like an internal sat nav for the hospital. I can put the toilets on there. If they were there all day, I can show them where the restaurant was. Just kind of really obvious things. And to a group of people on this call, this look really straightforward, but this is quite a big deal for patients of ours. And without sort of wishing to patronise them, because I've done it myself and followed some around, we get a lot of people who turn up with those outpatient letters who can't read. So across the kind of area, the constituency that we cover across East Kent, we've got some of the most deprived wards in the country, and we have people who are walking around with the letter knowing that someone like me will come up to them and realise they probably are lost and kind of guide them through. But we found that by presenting it in a way that people would be used to on a kind of smartphone, like a kind of sat nav, they can do some of that themselves. So, so there's a very sort of administrative function to this type of thing. What we're looking at the moment is whether we can track outbreak better than we would have obviously previously been used to. So we've got quite good data on where our patients are, but we haven't got very good data as the NHS on where our staff are, or where each of the renal dialysis machines is, or where each of the drug charts are within the hospital. So we're kind of talking through beautiful information to some kind of IoT providers, looking at Bluetooth technology and, sort of barcoding people having wristbands on so that we can track if they've gone through a door, all kinds of things. And Paul's on the call. Paul's going to put a link in the chat about a webinar that we're going to run on this next week as well, actually. So my main point I wanted to get across was that for all that we've talked about geography, and that's all great and all groovy, the geography of the building is really, really, really important at the moment when we're trying to track outbreak and and design staff rotas and cleaning rotas and all sorts of things. Was it the cleaner who was asymptomatic who worked across those two wards that created the problem that we had? So that's kind of that. How am I for time, Paul? Have I got another minute or so?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The other couple of other things I just wanted to mention very briefly. So that's some work we've done kind of inside, which we can share how we did that. We just worked with a local university. I think there's a role for hospitals, kind of as Jessica was alluding to, where us, industry and universities and the open source community should work much, much better together, because we've got a million research questions the whole time. If you want to do a PhD, just walk towards a hospital. So I'm trying to create really good relationships with the local universities, because they're good for literature reviews, young bright students, all of that. And this example has worked really well. Someone could write this up. You're then into kind of more traditional measures of COVID that we've done with things like Power BI, which again, we can share how we did this. This is a kind of different level. This is something we're playing with at the moment. This is plotting our COVID cases by geography. Just give it a moment to render. We dropped care homes on here, all kinds of things, but kind of live plotting of nosocomial data, right through to kind of dashboard type data like this, which you could kind of render on a phone very easily, looking at how many COVID patients we've got in blue, how many in red, how many suspected cases we've got, which is these whites with a blue outer ring across each of our sites. We're looking at data which we wouldn't historically know much about. How much oxygen do we think we need? So as a lot of you know, a few months ago, the race was on to build ITUs and ventilators, and with the best intention, that wasn't the right direction to head in. But we had to learn really quickly all about how to measure oxygen data and flow and capacity and so on. And then basically looking down into each of our areas about how many patients we've got on each ITU, how many beds we've got coming up later, and so on. And the last thing I wanted to mention very briefly, just because I think it's quite interesting and quite controversial, is we are also, and this kind of reflects my academic background, I'm really interested in ethnicity and the whole thing around BAME. We're trying to kind of get rid of that term because it's not particularly helpful and it's not particularly meaningful. So we're working with an organisation that look at people's forename and surname and allocate characteristics and kind of odds ratios of characteristics to those. So this is some anonymised patient data for you. And I'm really interested in, are there variations, most of all in risk? So are certain members of our staff at greater risk of COVID, and do we need to draw them back from certain services? And then potentially, are there certain groups that have a role by accident or deliberately in spreading it? So have we got certain ethnicities that always tend to fulfill certain roles, and do they worry in a different way to other ethnic groups? Do they inadvertently spread because of their movement and their social interactions between different groups? So we're doing something, and this kind of links back to a point Paul was making, where the IG is quite sensitive around some of these things. I think we, as part of Open Data Saves Lives, we want to put up a strong case to say, let's start with best intentions and let's start from yes instead of no, if you like. Let's not start from a kind of vague privacy concern argument, but start from a principle of, if there are certain ethnic groups at greater risk, let's get through the IG more quickly than we had historically and actually start linking and proving some of this stuff. So I'll stop there. I think the contribution today, Paul, as from a couple of weeks ago, is to look at geography inside a building. If that's the only thing people take away, that's powerful. And we're kind of interested in sharing how we've done this and taking other people's ideas about how useful this is. But we're also, as Paul and I know, we're kind of really interested in pushing the argument on the IG with some help from ODI HQ as well, as Paul was kind of alluding to. I'll stop there, I think, Paul.